The next chapter we're going to listen to from Journey to Nowhere is actually the last chapter, called The Chinking is Stinking. And then I also noticed that at the end there's an author's note. And typically many times at the end of historical fiction books, especially if you have an author that's done a lot of research on the topic, there is an author's note to help us kind of understand her research behind the story, and to figure out kind of what was based on something that was true in history and what things were fiction. So we'll see if we have time to read that. So, The Chinking is Stinking. The camp came to life quickly the next day. The women bustled around to get breakfast so the men could go to work. Hannah helped me milk Chloe and find the eggs. There were no more chores after breakfast, so we went to see how the cabin was coming. It was beginning to take shape, with walls reaching higher than Mr. Pierce's shoulder. It took 4 men to lift each log into place, and Mr. Porter was waiting on the top of the wall to cut the notches. "That's as far as we can go with lifting them," Mr. Pierce said. "The rest we'll have to roll up." They leaned 2 poles against the wall. 2 men stood in the center and rolled the next log as far as they could reach, while 2 men on the ends pushed it all the way up to the top with forked poles. The cabin walls went up by pairs of logs, first on the sides, then on the ends, then back to the sides again. "It goes fast now," Hannah said. "Before you know it, they'll be putting up the gable ends and the roof poles. I expect we'll get to help with the chinking this afternoon." "Really? What's chinking?" "It's what they use to fill the spaces between the logs," Hannah said. "You'll see." Sure enough, after the noon meal, the men called the children out to the cabin site to help mix the chinking. They had taken the sod off a section of ground and added water to the dirt, making a trough of mud. Then Mr. Porter dumped a bag of some kind of hair into it. "That's from grooming the horses and oxen," Hannah said. "Everybody saves it in bags, so there's plenty when we need it." One of the Chubb brothers, the one without the boil, forked some straw into the mess. "All right, you children are going to make the chinking. Let's get started working this up. You all know what to do." Some of the younger boys jumped in and mashed the mixture around with their bare feet. I could tell Joshua couldn't believe he was being asked to wallow in the mud. Mama was always chasing him out of mud puddles. Now it was his job to get all muddy. He ran over to me. "Is it all right, Mem?" he asked. "Will Mama be angry with me?" "I don't think so, Joshua. After all, it is our cabin. It's only right that you should help." He jumped in with both feet and stomped around, splattering anybody who got too close. He turned back to me. "You should be helping too, Mem." "Oh, it does look like fun," I said. Hannah grabbed my hand. "Well, let's join in then. In a few more years, we'll have to act like young ladies. You'd never catch Mercy and Eliza muddying their precious little feet." We waded out into the mess. The mud felt cool and silky, oozing up between my toes. Mrs. Porter's sad-eyed daughter looked longingly at us. "Come on in, Olive Ann," Hannah said, reaching out to her. "I'll hold your hand." Olive Ann dipped her toe in the mud and pulled it back. Hannah coaxed her a bit more, and soon she was right in the middle of it, stamping her feet and laughing with the boys. "This is fun," I said. "How long do we get to do this?" "Well, there's something else that has to be mixed in," Hannah said. "Here it comes." Mr. Pierce came over to the pit, balancing what looked like lumps of mud on his pitchfork. I was just about to ask what it was when I caught a whiff of it. "That smells like," Hannah laughed. "Manure?" "Is it? I'm getting out." Hannah pulled me back. "Don't be so finicky. It's not so bad once it gets mixed in the mud. The boys love to stomp around in manure. Let them do it first." Sure enough, the 2 Crandall boys were mashing in the pile with great relish. Joshua joined them, holding his nose. "The chinking is stinking," he shouted. Jesse Crandall, just about the same age as Joshua, got laughing so hard he slipped and fell face first into the mess. Joshua pounced on him, and the 2 of them threw gobs of chinking at each other until Mr. Crandall and Papa hauled them to their feet by the seat of their trousers. "You boys aren't doing your job," Mr. Crandall said. "Get to marching around to mix everything together." Jesse's older brother, Rufus, started chanting, Stinking, chinking, stinking, chinking, stomping his feet in rhythm to the words. We all joined in, sloshing around in the big bowl of mud. Soon the chinking was declared ready by Mr. Pierce. All right, everybody go dunk in the creek to get the mud washed off. Mind you watch out for the little ones. We waded into the creek. The day had turned hot enough that the cold water felt good. Hannah and I sat on a large rock and scrubbed the caked mud off our feet and legs. I rinsed the bottom of my skirt too, but it would take hot water and soap to get it really clean. Joshua was doing more splashing than cleaning up, so I called him over. He climbed on my lap and twisted around to look at me. Isn't this the very best day you've ever had in your whole life, Mem? Can we do this again? I reached down to rub the mud from between his toes. I expect we'll be going to Mr. Porter's cabin raising soon. You'll be a big help now that you know how to make chinking. Joshua turned away, but I could tell by the way his ears raised up that he was grinning, pleased with himself. I'm a stinky chinker, he said, then fell back against me, dissolving into giggles over his own joke. When I finished cleaning him up, Joshua climbed out of the creek to play tag with Jessie. Let's sit here for a few minutes, Hannah said. I stretched out my feet and watched the way the current caught my skirt and swirled it into ruffles at the hem. Several small fish slipped by, flashing silver in the sunlight. With so many trees cut down near the cabin, the woods didn't seem so dark and gloomy anymore. Hannah's father called us, cutting short my daydreams. When we got back to the cabin, Mr. Pierce was giving pails of chinking to all the children, except Joshua and Jessie, who would have put more of it on each other than on the cabin. Hannah, you teach Mem how to chink the walls. The rest of you know how to do it. Hannah and I took a pail of chinking over to the cabin wall. First, she had me help her gather sticks and small branches. It's not hard. You jam in a stick and take up some of the space, then fill in the rest with chinking. She scooped up a hunk of mud and pressed it into the space between the logs, smoothing it out as she worked her way along the wall. Do you see? I got some sticks and worked alongside her on the log below. Is it going to smell like this in the house? I asked. Hannah shrugged. On a rainy day, you'll know there's manure in your walls. You'll get used to it, though. Most of the time, I don't even notice. Mr. Porter and Mr. Pierce cut through the wall to make a door and 2 windows, while Mr. Chubb and his sons showed Papa how to lay out a slab roof. We all worked for the rest of the afternoon until the sun was starting to slant low through the trees to the west. By the time we stopped, our cabin looked like a place that could be lived in. There was lots of work that we still had to do after the others left, but the hard parts were finished. Papa brought Mama out to see the cabin. She was so happy she cried. We had a celebration that night after supper was cleared up. Everybody had special treats that they had saved for the last night. Mama put out her cakes on a plate, already cut in slices, so you couldn't tell we had already eaten some. Mrs. Pierce savored every bite. Ariella, I'd surely be pleased to have the recipe for this cake. It is the best I've had in ages. Mama blushed. It's nothing fancy, Rebecca. Just a 1, 2, 3, 4 with raisins put in the batter. Cabin raisins, Joshua added. Everybody laughed. Then Joshua ran over to Mama and buried his face in her skirt. I was glad to see he still got embarrassed sometimes. Papa put extra logs on the main fire so it blazed up and lit the whole camp. Tonight everybody stayed together instead of the women and men separating into 2 groups. Mr. Pierce brought out his fiddle and started to play a tune so lively even Mama couldn't sit still. Lemuel played along on his tin whistle and everybody gathered into a big circle, clapping hands. First we did a dance where we all held hands, even the smallest children. It was a simple step, mostly just circling in one direction and then the other. Mrs. Porter danced holding the baby on her hip. The next dance was a reel, and Mercy lined herself up so Ezekiel would be her partner, even though her mother shot her a very disapproving look. Since Hannah and I didn't have partners, we sat on the big pile of hay Mr. Crandall had brought as a gift to us. There had been other gifts too. Mrs. Chubb had brought a goose down pillow, and there was a bundle of fleece from Mr. Pierce's flock of sheep. Even the Porters, who had lost everything in the fire, brought a fat laying hen. Is there always a party like this when a cabin goes up? I asked. Hannah nodded. Anything is an excuse for a party. In the fall, we have log rollings to burn off the extra trees that have been cut. Then they have husking bees to husk the corn. The boy who finds a red ear gets to kiss any girl he wants. Mercy cheated last year. She looked for a red ear in the field and gave it to Ezekiel before the husking bee. Then he went and kissed Eliza, just to make her jealous. The fiddles started a new dance, one where couples spun each other around and around. Joshua ran over to me. Be my partner, Mem. We grasped hands and galloped in circles. It might not have been the right step, but it didn't seem to matter. Joshua finally let go of my hands. I'm dizzy, he shouted. Look, Mem, I can't walk straight. He stumbled a zigzag path like a man who had been spinning around in circles. He landed in a hay pile, giggling. Someone said, Lost your partner? And Royal Pierce took my hands. He seemed to know the steps, and it wasn't hard to follow him. We whirled around and around, skirting close to the fire, until the song came to an end. A long enough time for our hands to get really hot and sweaty. Mr. Pierce started playing again, and Royal asked if I wanted another dance. Not right now, thank you, I said, glad to have my hands to myself again. I needed to get away from the fire and all the people to catch my breath and to take in the wonder of it all. The past weeks since we left Connecticut were spinning through my head like the dancers I watched in the firelight. So many faces had flickered into my life and faded as fast as they had appeared. But these new faces, now golden from the flames, wouldn't fade. These were the people who would take the place of our family in Connecticut, helping us and caring about us through my growing up years. I touched Grandma's locket. I knew that she and her grandma Remembrance would be happy for us. Hannah and her brother danced past me, Hannah's braids almost hitting him in the face as she spun. I knew Hannah and I would become great friends and would band together against Mercy and Eliza. I knew that Joshua and Jesse would each get each other in a heap of trouble before they were grown up. Now Mama had Rebecca Pierce and Emmeline Porter and the others to talk women talk with, and Papa had the men to teach him what he needed to know. I could hardly wait until we all got together again at the log rollings, husking bees, and cabin raisings for new settlers. I watched Papa swing Mama around and around. Her hair had pulled loose from her bun and cascaded down her back. I'd never seen her look so beautiful. They danced around the circle a few more times until they tumbled laughing into the hay pile, out of breath. Joshua ran over to pounce on top of Papa, and I followed close behind, snuggling into the warm space between Mama and Papa. Mama brushed my hair out of my eyes and kissed me on the forehead. Do you feel happy now, Mem? She asked, smiling. Oh, yes, Mama, I whispered. And even though we were in the middle of the wilderness, a place completely different from anything I had known before, a voice inside my head said, and I feel safe, Mama. I feel as if we've come home. And that is the last chapter in Journey to Nowhere.